Joining me now is State Department Spokesperson Tommy Pigott. First of all, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been 2 years, as you know, since the Hamas attack on Israel, the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. Very painful on this somber anniversary. We also know there are ongoing negotiations in Egypt for peace, and everything that I've read, it appears that there may have at least initially been some progress with Hamas. What's the latest on that front?
Well, of course, this being 2 years since October 7th, it's a reminder that we stand with Israel, that we stand with Israel's right to defend itself. And as President Trump often says, we need to remember October 7th. We need to see the hostages released, and we have been working towards that. It's a reminder and a reaffirmation of our commitment to do that. And then through this process, hopefully, getting the hostages released, ending this dark chapter in history, but then also hopefully laying those foundations for peace and prosperity throughout the entire region. As President Trump said in the Oval Office just a few hours ago, talking about the fact that in some way or another conflict like this has been going on for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And we have a chance here through the support we're seeing across the Arab world, our European partners, to end this dark chapter, release the hostages, and lay those foundations for peace and prosperity to see, as President Trump said just a few months ago, a golden age for the Middle East. That's what we're working towards here.
And, you know, as it's been stated, this is a very complex process with these ongoing negotiations. We've been here before. I've heard that, you know, we could potentially see some resolution by the end of this week, but correct me if I'm wrong. In this 20-point plan, can you also quickly clarify the proposal for governance in Gaza, specifically who would control this area?
Well, look, a lot of these talks are ongoing, and I'm not going to get ahead of these talks nor speculate what may happen in the future here. As the Secretary said over the weekend, no one says this is going to be easy. This is going to be difficult. This is going to be hard work. This administration is putting in the hard work. We're seeing, as President Trump just said recently, administration representatives in the region talking about this. I think also it's important, again, to remember that context of all of the countries across the world that are supporting this initiative, that support this peace plan. Only President Trump could bring together all of these countries together in support of this peace plan to implement this plan. So those talks are ongoing, but as the Secretary made clear over the weekend in a series of interviews, and as we've been clear from the very beginning of this administration, there can be no long-term peace and prosperity with Hamas as a governing force in Gaza or otherwise. So these talks are ongoing, but we've been very clear on that in terms of there can be no long-term peace and prosperity with Hamas as a governing force in Gaza or otherwise.
As you know, there are still 48 hostages in Gaza, and we understand Idan Alexander, the freed Israeli-American hostage, had a meeting with President Trump at the White House today. Explain the symbolic nature of this meeting, and if you can, a timeline for the remaining hostages released, Trump said very soon.
Well, as President Trump said, that is a clear priority for this administration. And as President Trump has said from the very beginning of this administration, bringing Americans home is a massive priority for this administration, both Idan Alexander, but Americans across the world as well. And we've seen that happen again and again and again. The highest priority of this administration, this State Department, being the safety and security of Americans at home and abroad, working for that continually. But the president reaffirming today that we need to see the hostages released immediately. He's been very clear on that. He's been working towards that. The Secretary has been very clear on that. That is a high priority here during these plans, these discussions that are ongoing currently.
And in the midst of all of this, there is a government shutdown. How could that impact day-to-day diplomatic and foreign relations? And also, what message does this send internationally?
Well, I think ultimately what it's showing is, of course, we're continuing here at the State Department the critical missions that we possibly can. Protecting the national security of the United States, continuing those critical missions such as passport services, consular services. So if you're overseas and you're in trouble, please contact the embassy. Please contact the local consulate. They will be able to assist you, hopefully, in those efforts. So those remain open, those critical missions. But to be honest with this, there are less people working here at the State Department now than there were during when the government was open. And that's having an effect on our foreign policy. We are seeing the fact that we're missing proactive opportunities in order to push our foreign policy forward because of the shutdown. And what that means is a lot of these issues we're seeing in the news from day in and day out are often the result of hard work happening at the State Department for many months, and we're missing a lot of those proactive opportunities because some critics of this administration voted to shut down the government. And make no mistake on this, President Trump wants the government to open. He wants the continuing resolution to pass. He does not want this government to be shut down, but critics in Congress are instead insisting on shutting down the government.
Well, speaking of diplomatic relations, the Trump administration, as you know, has ramped up deadly attacks on alleged drug boats off the coast of Venezuela. Trump reportedly called off diplomatic outreach to Venezuela. The U.S. is already now in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels. Can you shed some light on that? Is de-escalation feasible?
Well, I'm not going to comment on those reports from anonymous sources. What I can say, though, is that we have a policy of stopping the flow of deadly drugs into the United States. And what I can say from the State Department's perspective is we have taken concrete steps to get that done, including designating certain cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, combating illegal immigration, making sure we have tools available to stop the flow of deadly drugs into the United States. One of the largest causes of death of Americans aged 18 to 45 are overdoses, fueled largely by fentanyl overdoses. So we are committed to stopping the flow of deadly drugs into this country, and the president has made that clear.
State Department Spokesperson Tommy Pigott, we know how busy you are. Thank you for making time for us here on the National News Desk. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.